Now let me change hats from an evolution hat to an astronomical hat. Let's look out into space. Have you ever heard of the Drake equation? The Drake equation is an equation that is a guesstimate at best, but what it does is it seeks to estimate by probability, by averages and statistics, how many planets are there out there with intelligent species on them. Now the Drake equation can be done very conservatively. If you want to really lowball it and say, what, even given the most stringent standards imaginable, what are my chances of having intelligent life out there? And we can assume that life can only be done just like it's done here. We have to have a planet that receives this much light from a star. We have to assume that the planet is, the correct distance from the star. We have to assume that there's water. We have to assume that it has an atmosphere, that it blocks the radiation just right. We have to assume the possibility of, even if all those things are present, what are the possibilities of life actually happening on that planet? And then what are the chances that that life actually becomes intelligent? And, we can get extremely stringent with our standards with the Drake equation if we want to. Now, that's being extremely stringent, like I'm saying, but in reality, it's probably far less stringent than that because we think about life as we know it. Well, life requires certain chemicals and certain combinations to exist as we understand it. But really, carbon-based life on this planet, it makes sense because carbon has a certain valence and its electronegativity and such. But on a planet where maybe there's not so much carbon, it would be theoretically possible to have tin-based life or lead-based life, possibly. So even going by the most stringent standards we can think of, and throwing out some of the more recent data to plug into the Drake equation, to put into it, throw into it, using the Kepler telescope that we've launched. I believe it was 2009. Anyways, if we plug in that data and we really lowball it, we're looking at 2 planets in this galaxy alone that would have not only life on it, but intelligent life on it. 2 planets. And even if we count ours as the first, that means there's at least one other. And that's just by averages. Doesn't necessarily mean that's true. It just means, that statistically that would be the case. Now, every time you look out into space and discover a new planet, there is a possibility that planet will have intelligent life on it. It's like rolling the dice. And if you don't win, then you simply move on to another planet where you roll the dice again. So what are the chances of actually finding a planet that have intelligent life on it? Well, that's what the Drake equation does. And the chances are really quite low. Astronomically low, actually. Fortunately, we are dealing in astronomy. So, seeing as how more recent estimates suggest that there are somewhere around 100 billion stars in the Milky Way galaxy alone, and then we have planets that go around the stars, we can roll the dice really quite a few times. And then we have to consider how many galaxies there are in the universe. And by what's considered to be some of astronomers' more accurate estimates, there are probably somewhere around at least 100 billion galaxies in our known universe. Except we're not actually sure how big the universe is. We only know what we've been able to calculate and look at so far. So in reality, there could be far more than that. As soon as we extend the calculations of the Drake equation to other galaxies, how many intelligent species would exist out there in the universe? Billions. So, what are the chances of life existing out there? Remember, when I told you that the Drake equation, by current estimates, suggests that there would be at least two in the Milky Way galaxy alone, that's the bottom of the estimate. That's the lowest it goes. They're suggesting two. It goes much higher than that if you want to be more lenient with the standards. So even by the most stringent standards, there are really a lot of intelligent species out there in the universe, if we're going to go by this evolution sort of thing. So if we assume that evolution is what creates life, and there are all of these planets that have life on them and are subject to evolution, and evolution yields a god eventually, then we would be forced to come to the conclusion that statistically there are probably some very powerful super beings that exist out there in the universe. Someone might say, well, how do we know that they are any more advanced than we are? Well, we don't. But consider this. What if they started their evolutionary process long before we ever did? You see, what if there was a planet, let's go the other direction. What if there was a planet that could sustain life, just like on Earth, except it doesn't have life on it yet? Could it have life in another 100 million years? Sure, it could. So then, if there are all of these planets out there that have life on them, would all of the life on all of these planets that have life on them have started simultaneously? No, of course not. One would start life at this time, and then one would start life 100 million years later, and then one would start life 100 million years sooner, and, you know, so then some of the life that would develop into intelligent species would be significantly older than ours. So imagine if there was a planet that developed intelligent life. Let's say their evolutionary process started 1 billion years before us, before humanity. In terms of evolution, they would be 1 billion years ahead of us. Now consider us, right now, and assume that we actually managed to survive for another 1 billion years without killing ourselves. Can you even imagine what we as humanity are going to be able to do? Or what we're going to be like in 1 billion years from now? 400, 500 years from now. But 1 billion years in the future? We would be so far advanced, we would be able to bend reality to do practically anything we want. Probably one of us, just one human, could probably fly around the universe and simply come across a planet and say, oh, I think I'm going to terraform a planet over here and put life on it because why not? That would please me. We will almost undoubtedly be immortal by that point. So then, what's to stop another species from being a billion years ahead of us, and it comes over to our planet, and it decides to create life here, just because it can. And it doesn't have to be a whole species. Beings that far advanced could probably do it just by themselves if they wanted to. One of them. So, is it possible for evolution to create a god? Yes. And as soon as that exists, and we see how advanced it can really get, just considering where we are going to go, it becomes entirely feasible for there to be a super being out there that ancient humans would have considered to be a god, and it could have come here to Earth, and it could have created life or started life here on Earth, and be shaping it. And so it's entirely possible for there to be super beings. So even if you look at evolution and assume that evolution is true and extrapolate it out to its logical end, you still end up with the existence of a god in the end.